Hello, it's a great day here at Elville and Associates. My name is Jeff Stauffer, Community Relations Director here at the firm, and welcome to today's webinar, our wellness series. And our topic for discussion today is the power of relationships. Our special guest presenter today is Dr. Michelle Fritsch, who's led all of our wellness series presentations in the past. She's a wonderful friend of the firm and many through her work in a retirement wellness presentation. It's a pleasure to welcome Michelle back today. This is, I would say, our 20th presentation together. And as we want this to be, as I know, it's hard to believe, Michelle, and we want this to be as interactive as possible. And we're going to unmute all attendees during today's presentation when Michelle is looking for your feedback and thoughts, which will be throughout most of the presentation. So while you can still post your feedback in our questions panel and our chat, feel free to speak up and let your voice be heard at any time. You also received the presentation by email from me yesterday to take notes on it if you wish. And also the slides are available in the section marked handouts on your screen to download at this time. Everyone will also receive a post-webinar feedback email right after the presentation. So please take just a couple minutes to fill out this very brief survey and offer us your feedback about today's presentation. If you have a topic in mind that you'd like to hear in an upcoming wellness series or in our webinar series as a whole, please feel free to note that, and we always value your feedback very much. And here at Elville & Associates, we always work with families and our clients with the ideals of client education, collaboration, and compassion in mind. We're always available for consultation to discuss your family's planning needs, and always look forward to being a resource to you now and in the future. And what in the world does estate planning have to do with relationships? You might be asking that question. Well, we don't necessarily have to have webinars that have to do with legal things all the time, but as Steve Elville frequently says in his presentations, planning is always goal-oriented, and many times it comes down to love and ensuring that those you care about are taken care of. So it does have a lot to do with relationships in many respects. So keep that in mind. And at this time, it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Michelle Fritsch, who I have a lot of admiration for, been a great resource to people here at the firm and myself. I'd like to offer her a brief introduction here. So Dr. Michelle Fritsch is a board-certified geriatric clinical pharmacist with a passion for healthy aging and education. She is a specialist in medication use prevention and retirement transition for people over 60. She is the founder of Retirement Wellness Strategies, a one-on-one concierge retirement wellness portfolio planning program, and co-founder of Propel Comprehensive Wellness. She works with a broad definition of health: physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, and social, aligned with purpose in each phase of life. Her career has included academia, advanced interprofessional geriatric teams, creating a nonprofit within a health system that served the underserved, medical missions, student services for the underserved of Baltimore, and much, much more. So Michelle, thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate it and look forward to listening to you today.
Thank you, Jeff. That was such a beautiful introduction. And I agree with you. I think relationships have a lot to do with the planning that you all do at Elville and Associates and the planning that we guide people through. Because if we do plan the wellness portfolio along with the legal and financial planning, we have every opportunity of living longer, living more engaged, and really protecting our families. Because you think about everything that Elville does, very much is oriented to families and protecting legacies. But that is so true with the health side. The more you can stay healthy and engaged and make some personal, more health-related decisions, those protect your family and prevent chaos for them. So we'll try to dive into some of that today as we're talking about relationships. I'm so glad you all are here. I do ask that you sort of play along with me, and I love for these to be interactive. And this one was actually an asked for, a requested conversation. So I'll be anxious to hear if we've answered the questions that were posed. Get my slide to change. There we go. So I have a question. Please put in the chat, and Jeff, let me know what we hear. people that are here, have you already retired at this point or not yet? Or maybe never plan to. If that's the case, tell us that too. And again, your microphones are open. So if you would prefer to come on and talk with me about your decision, I'd love to hear that also.
They are open, yes. Very willing to share if you want.
Yes. So what are we seeing? Retired, not retired?
So we have, okay. Have somebody says they're semi-retired, not yet retired, are retired, yes, they're retired, yes, they're retired.
All right, so we've got a good mix. Thank you all for
Michelle, I'm not retired yet.
Not yet. Me neither.
Just letting you know. Got a little ways to go.
If you have retired, were you prepared for the relationship shifts? And if you're not yet retired, have you even thought about the relationship shifts that are going to happen? Could I have put two more difficult words together? I don't think I could have. I wasn't thinking about having to say them out loud. Is there anyone on the line who was surprised by relationship changes and wish that other people had, that they themselves would have given it more thought and would encourage others to give it more thought?
I was not prepared for the relationship shifts.
Tell me about it.
I didn't realize how much was involved in my social interactions before I retired and before I moved. I relocated when I retired, so.
And we're going to talk about that. Yeah, very directly, because the move, did that not just sort of compound the shifts?
It did. And I mean, I was prepared for the move and had been planning it for a few years, but that part of it, that component of relationships, I did not consider.
Thank you for sharing that, because it's big and it impacts so many people.
We have a few people that say partially. Another person says, I need to give this some more thought. And then lastly, at first, yes, as time went on, however, especially with COVID, needed to evolve to a new state.
I will tell you, this is something we dive into in our process. The concierge version, where people work with me one-on-one, those are often leaders of companies. And this is the one place that I've seen a number of leaders, even men, cry when they realize how much of their time and effort is engaging with employees, with business partners, with colleagues. Sometimes it's breakfast meetings, lunch meetings, dinner meetings, after work meetings. It's consuming, and that those relationships continue after you retire, like this little hive of activity that hardly blinks when you retire, but you're no longer part of it. And the relationships that are now important to you are the ones that maybe haven't gotten as much attention. Can anybody relate to that? A quick story, a man who was really one of the leaders of a large investment firm, and was constantly, part of his final reason to retire was it was just so consuming. People needed him constantly. And he left, he retired, got a big retirement send-off, went home. After a month, he'd kind of done the whole sleep in, drink coffee, have the more casual life. He went back just figuring they probably had a lot of questions for him and really needed him. So he got back into his suit and tie and he went back into the office, and it was kind of devastating. Nobody needed anything. They were doing just fine, even though they'd needed him so desperately right before he left.
as somebody says that my brother has experienced this shift.
Yeah, it can be powerful. So let's talk about what we can do. So personal shifts, and again, speak up if you've experienced some of these. Who are you? If you are, I'll pick on the Elville law firm. If you're a lawyer, who are you when you're not a lawyer? What's your purpose? And I believe we all have them every phase of our life, but sometimes we got to dig a little bit to figure out what it is. What about your finances? A lot of people talk about that going on to the more fixed income and how difficult that is and what kind of shift that is. Relationships at home. If you care to look at my LinkedIn post this morning, I told the story of someone who'd worked for decades, really long hours, worked really, really hard. And when he announced to his wife he was retiring, she said, "You're not going to be in this house." There were a few conversations that they had not yet had as they were nearing retirement. Relationships in the rest of your family, kids, grandkids, aunts, uncles, cousins, who's going to be kind of more actively in your life. Work colleagues, kind of talked about that. It becomes different. Those may be lifelong friends, but you have to work a little differently to stay connected because you're no longer in the same office building. Role changes. There was one man, this is not funny, but it is. He was a household name in his profession. Everyone knew who he was. He was in charge. He'd been in his position of leadership for over 20 years. And the week after he retired, he was walking through the kitchen and his wife said, "Hey, could you, chop up this vegetable?" And he went ballistic. "I am not a sous chef. What do you think I am?" And it was just a big indicator that there were some role shifts that he hadn't yet reconciled to and figured out who he was now and what he really wanted at that point. And I'm saying he. There are a number of women as they retire have undergone the same thing, to go from being a female executive or a female in the workplace to now being at home. And women are not always nice to women who have chosen different life patterns, and to adjust into that can be difficult. There can be unexpected losses. The longer we go through this lifetime, the more losses we experience. Changes in how you're going to use your time. You've got this new freedom, but sometimes people don't know what to do with it. So that's a lot. Let me stop and you all tell me what some of your experiences have been.
I definitely had to figure out who I was after I stopped working full time and what my purpose was going to be. Had no clue, and did not expect some of the changes in relationships with family.
And how did you navigate that, or are you still navigating all of that?
I knew I didn't want to rely on my daughter and grandkids as being my sole source of entertainment and social. But I didn't realize how busy they were and really didn't have that much time for me anyway. So that was, the kids had grown up a lot since my original plan. So, I had to come to terms with that. And, but I found part-time work and, I got to meet more people. And so that helped too.
Thank you for sharing that. You're making me think of some other people who moved to be with a child and help take care of the grandkids. And in a blink, the grandkids were in high school and never around, and then they went off to college and they realized that wasn't really a long-term plan.
Right.
Anything else anybody wants to share? Yeah, Jeff.
Comments here, Michelle. Actually, the most difficult part was the evolution and change in perspectives within a volunteer organization. I re-engaged, especially across age demographics. And then another statement, currently now the passing of former friends and colleagues.
That is really difficult to navigate. Some people find that in their career, if they loved what they did, that is where they get their energy and their motivation, and they can assume that retirement is going to be unsatisfying and I'm going to sit around and watch Netflix all the time and I'm just really going to hate it. And without any planning, I find that to be true. I find people, I call it like fall off the cliff. Like I'm going, work is busy. I've got so much to do. I've got to, I don't have time to think about other things. I've got to get to those final objectives that I want to meet, those final things that I want to wrap up, those final things that I need to document and pass on to my successor. And then Friday's the big party and Monday they fall off a cliff. They've got nothing. They haven't given it any thought, any planning, don't know who they are anymore. It can be devastating. And Ellen Platt, who many of you know, Ellen and I have found that sometimes if people don't think about it until they get there, it's almost they've fallen into the pit so deeply, it's very hard to pull them back out. So we have this deep desire to help people think about this before the day of retirement so that they know exactly where they're going next. They know what that next purpose is going to be. They've already thought about it. They've talked with the key relationships in their life. That's our dream, is that we get in front of this and people have a chance to think about it ahead of time so that they don't fall, again, just kind of fall into nothingness because they don't have a plan. And the number one thing, our number one objective, is to help people avoid isolation. So that's a time when you're not connected to other people anymore. And sometimes people are like, oh, that sounds wonderful, but it's only wonderful for a short time. Long term, it's really devastating on all aspects of your health. Jeff mentioned in the introduction, it's not good for your physical health because you tend to be less active. You tend to not eat as well when you're all by yourself. It's not good for your mental health. It can lead to some really severe depression. It's not good for your emotional health. You don't have somebody to kind of talk with as you get, you hear the news or things happen in your community or your family. If you're processing it all by yourself, it's not good for your health. Spiritual health is important in all of us. However we practice that tends to not be expressed when we're in isolation. And then obviously social health, there is no social connection. So our number one thing, how do we avoid isolation? And we're going to talk some more about that in just a little bit. So how do we preserve current relationships? It's kind of where we start. And then we're going to think about where do you find new relationships? So if you've got a spouse, a partner, a best friend, whoever you anticipate will intersect most closely with your life after retirement, is that person still working? Have you talked about your plans? What I find really frequently is when people are young and in love, they've got all these plans and they really map out their vision for the future. And then not long after that, they start perhaps having children or getting really engaged with their career. And in our head, we assume that all those early plans are still rock solid. But the reality is a lot of life changes have happened for each of you. And if we don't come back together and talk about those, there can be some really big surprises. So again, Ellen and I are really encouraging of people, and we've got some tools to help them have some important conversations. It doesn't all have to be deep and dark and what if kind of conversation. There's even the good stuff. What do you want to do in the future? What do you want to travel? Where would you like to go? What hobbies are you going to pursue? Because I'm going to pursue these. They don't have to be the same. What kind of activities do we want to do? I know people that have gone off and taken cooking classes to do, to make their favorite kinds of foods, or they've decided to some sort of expressive artistic music or art, or learn how to draw or paint or make wooden bowls. And what's the timing? Who of you and your closest relationships, who wants to do what when, so that you can start talking about that. So for those who've already retired, did you feel like you'd had these conversations along the way, or did anybody get kind of caught up short that, woof, How did we get on such separate pages? As you're thinking about it, I had a very early conversation today with a friend in the UK, because that's a really long ways off. And I found out, I did not know this was happening, but he and his wife had divorced just a few weeks ago after over 40 years of marriage. And this was a big part of it. Even though they'd been married for so long, they realized they were on completely different pages and they couldn't pull it back together. And data has shown that the rise in divorce rate in people over 50 is just exponential. It's gone up so much. It's our hope, because sometimes divorce is necessary, is the right thing. Sometimes it feels like the easy thing. And I think those are the situations that Ellen and I have seen how those impact all the rest of the family and all the rest of the people. That if we can have conversations early and not allow this surprise to rip people apart, but rather they kind of figure out their differences and have a chance to reconcile those, that it's worth it because of the impact on all the friends, on all the kids, on all the, you know, the rest of the family. If you've been there, you know that divorce is very complicated. So if we can, we're trying to prevent some of that. Any comments at this point?
Comment, Michelle.
Yeah.
Says, I retired, took care of family members who then passed away. I thought, well, now what? I got more involved with my church, where I met many people through attending programs, bus trips, and volunteering.
That sounds like a fantastic plan that is working out really well.
Michelle, let me ask you something. How important, I know you're certainly involved in this, but how important do you think before retirement, like probably well before retirement, do you think an important financial plan is to have in place as like a roadmap for the future to be successful in a lot of different ways for when you get to retirement, to avoid surprises and to avoid a lot of the things you just talked about?
It's a great question, and I firmly believe that the best way to have that bright future is to plan the health and the wealth together. Because what good is tons of money if you don't have the opportunity to enjoy it? And I'm thinking of a situation right now where someone has lots of money, but their spouse is ill and declining rapidly, and both of their kids have special needs, and they're finding that the money is not bringing the future that they had hoped to have. On the flip side, if there's not enough money and they don't realize that, and that's part of the surprise that comes with retirement, boy, that's a source of huge stress that can rip relationships apart as well. So beautiful question. The health and the wealth are both important.
Last thing I'll say just real quick is I talked to a lot of financial advisors here at the firm. We are not financial advisors on the money side of things, but I talked to a lot of them, and they say that most people do not go see a financial advisor until their early 60s, which is a mistake. And one should be ideally doing something like this years and years and years before their retirement, so they can get the most out of that planning process. So I'm also not a financial advisor, but I know a lot that are smart, and that's just a smart thing to consider that they say. So
you think about it, prevention, and we're all trying to do the same. The financial advisors are trying to prevent you running out of money. Ellen and I are trying to prevent you running out of health and ability to do what you want to do. And all of those sorts of preventative things, the earlier you can start, the better. You give yourself more of a runway to really make important decisions and changes and actions that are going to have big long-term effects. So
Yeah,
great points.
Kind of like a lot of people don't come to get a will or their estate planning done until, unfortunately, a crisis situation happens, which is an unfortunate reality of the practice areas that we focus on. It's a lot easier to get it done early when everything is quote unquote going well, you know, as opposed to, oh my goodness, something bad's happening, I need to rush to get this done. So yeah, planning early is great in pretty much every aspect of life, I would say.
I agree. It is. And kind of related to that, I've had a number of people say, oh, I'm not worried. I'm going to be fine. I've got, and they list like one or maybe two people. And I'm just going to live out my life with that one or two people. And I imagine we've got a lot of stories of just among those of us on the call today where something happens to our one or two people and we've got no connections beyond that. Can anybody relate to that? Have you seen that happen with friends or family members? So we're going to celebrate. Go, yes, somebody say something. We're going to celebrate our one or two really close people because that is wonderful, but we're going to dig a little deeper. Ellen and I are big on making people go 3 layers deep. So what's your first plan and what's your backup plan and what's your backup to the backup plan so that you don't find yourself floundering and wondering what comes next. So let's spend some time thinking about how we find more people in our life. Now, starting with your one or two closest people, how many things do you want to do together? And how many things do you want to do individually? I'm thinking of a colleague right now whose parents have only ever, and they've been married 60 some years now, have only ever spent 2 nights apart in 60 some years. One night was a family member had a crisis, and so one of them went to deal with that, and the other one was one of them was in the hospital overnight, and the other one wasn't able to stay. So 2 nights apart in 60 some years. That's beautiful. And at the same time, that tells me that neither of them is really able to function without the other, which is going to make it really difficult if something happens to one or the other of them. Going back to early planning, Jeff, we find that a lot of people, when they start early and they think about, okay, I really want to go take an art class or a dancing class, that's my case, and the other person is like, yeah, I want nothing to do with that, but I'd really like to go learn this new sport. That's okay. It's good to have some individual interests as well as the dreams and plans for the things you want to do together. I was talking to a PhD nurse this morning who's not married, never been married, and she's looking forward to finding ways to go out and explore the world as a single woman, partly with friends, but then she's got some friends who don't like to be quite as active as she is. So some of them she's looking for groups that like to do the more physically active kind of tours that she's interested in being part of. So can anybody relate to this? That there's some things you want to do together, but also some things that are individual interests. Yeah, I get lonely when no one talks to me.
Yes, I can relate to that. Have a comment?
Thank you. So how do you enhance your key relationships? Kind of back to the guy who went home and his wife's like, you're not going to be in this house. they did start having some really healthy, important conversations at that point. All worked out well. But what can you do ahead of time in the theme of prevention and planning to think about who are those people you really want to spend more time with, get to know more deeply, and how do you start setting the stage before you just show up on their doorstep and they're like, okay, ta-da, I'm home all the time, 24/7, and you get the response that he got. Even think about building new relationships, and sometimes those are new relationships with old relationships. So let's talk about how that might happen, because what a fun opportunity to start to get to know more people, especially people that really align with who you are, your values, your interests. So one, this question kind of brought about this entire session. What if I move? I have my neighbors are not going to be the same neighbors. The people at my local coffee shop are going to be different people. I always find when I move, it feels so strange to go to the grocery store and not run into people you know. And so when I feel like I've sort of arrived in my new community, when I can go to the grocery store and have some familiar faces there.
I
So where
I
do we?
could say to that, I'd like to say to that was my situation, and I have to start building relationships fresh. I've kept in touch with people from my old life, previous life, but building new relationships. And one of the happiest moments was when somebody recognized me in a store, and it was somebody from another, somebody from church, but they were shopping, I was shopping. Somebody actually said hi to me, and it was just exciting, to be
I
seen and known.
Yes. Yes. Oh my goodness. Thank you for sharing that. Because usually when I share that story, people are like, because a lot of people haven't moved that often and had the chance to experience that. Thank you. And you
I've
mentioned,
learned to be patient with building those new relationships. It's going to take time because you don't have the years of history that you did with your close friends that you've left behind. Now you have to start without that history. And it's kind of interesting because you get to learn to listen to people more because you
yes,
have to learn about them. So I found that I listen more than I used to.
I love that. That is such a good point. And don't we all just deeply want someone to listen to us? It's kind of hard to find these days. Thank you for that. You mentioned old friends, and most of you are in Baltimore, right? I have to tell you, of all the places I've lived, Baltimoreans, is that what the name is? Are more likely to stay in touch with high school friends. And a lot of people identify themselves by the high school they went to versus I'm in North Carolina now, and people identify themselves by the college or the post high school training that they did. So I know a lot of people in and around Baltimore that their long-term plans involve high school friends that they've just stayed in touch either very tightly or maybe just loosely, but they still see opportunities to come back together in the next phases of their life. Anybody relate to that? Anybody still related or integrated with their high school friends?
I know of family members that are still very well connected to high school friends and elementary school friends. Yeah.
And then when we look at moving, you don't have those connections. But I have found sometimes those friend groups that are, decades old are still open to receiving you to come in and be an added member of their group, which is a great thing sometimes. And then think about affinity groups. This is, he's traveling, he's at the l'Arc de Triomphe in Paris. Are there places you'd like to go, things you'd like to see? And it's fun to identify people that share those interests and then experience those interests together. It could be a local art museum, it could be a local cooking class, or even a coffee shop or a Mexican restaurant where you just really especially like the food, or it can be global travel of different kinds. But finding people that like what you like is an easier way to meet people.
I have a comment.
Yeah.
Yes, I still have relationships with high school friends. My undergraduate education was University of Maryland College Park. It was a large university with a high commuter population, so relationships aren't always as tight between students and therefore between alumni when I compare to other universities or colleges that have small student populations.
That's a good point. I have, just thinking about my kids, they went to Clemson and Virginia Tech, really, really big schools, but they've got some tight friends sort of more within their interest area. But my youngest is at Queen's University here in Charlotte. She knows everybody and everybody knows her because it's a smaller environment. Pros and cons sometimes with that. So part of expanding your network is finding people that share your interests, your hobbies, maybe similar sports. I know there's a lot of people into pickleball. I have not yet tried that, and other activities. There are ways to go to local community colleges and universities and take classes to learn new things. There are, you could say, I like purple butterflies that tend to hatch in August, and you'll find other people that like purple butterflies that tend to hatch in August that would love to get together with you over a coffee or a meal and talk about your shared interests. Has anyone found people through any of these sorts of mechanisms?
I have tried some of that a little bit, but like the pickleball part of that. But since I'm only semi-retired, the majority of the people are either, like self-employed, or they have a lot more flexibility, and they are retired. And, it's didn't quite work out the way I planned it, at least not yet. So
Not yet.
give it a few more years if I keep playing.
And you'll be like the what do they call it? The person that comes in who's the expert that nobody knew that until you showed up. I'm thinking of a yeah.
Yeah, just going back to the high school friend comment. If somebody says I get together with my grade school friend, I've known her since 6 years old. I moved and we still make the effort to get together even though I'm further away.
Oh, I love that. That is a precious friendship.
A couple other comments here. Yes, in fact, I know people who travel the world looking for new species to them of butterflies. There we go.
Yes.
And another, yes, master gardeners for spouse, amateur radio for me, bird watching for both, and have 2 small gardens I like to eat.
Oh, I like that too. A friend of mine from growing up, when she retired, she started bicycling. She did not bike before, but she started bicycling, and she's got like 3 or 4 different bikes for different sorts of terrain. And she'll take her bike on an airplane and go meet up with other people that want to bike in some famous place, and she'll bicycle around that space. And again, she was not into the bicycling until she retired.
Another comment, walking, swimming, church social functions, American Red Cross volunteering, social lunches at a local diner. I'll be visiting with a childhood friend who I've known since brownies through elementary, middle, and high school. Lots of long-standing relationships here, sounds like.
Yes, indeed. I love hearing that. And so we're kind of, this is what we're talking about, friends of the past, friends that are new, extended family. I know some people who've moved to different places and they've reunited with cousins that they haven't seen in a long time, or children of cousins that they now live in the same area. Even friends of friends. Has anyone created friendships? Say you moved to a different place and some of your friends from place A had already friendships in place B, and because of that connection, then you connected with those people. Or neighbors, maybe neighbors from the past moved someplace and now you're at least going to visit that area and you reconnect with them. Any great reconnection stories? I heard one the other day where someone, that this couple had built their dream house and then work took them away. And the person that purchased their dream house, they had a friend in common. They realized that their dream house was now owned by this person, and now they're all connected and they visit back to their dream house with this newfound friend who now owns it. It's been kind of fun to watch that happen. What about shared spiritual beliefs? And I've heard a couple of you have talked about that being a place where you're able to find people. Sometimes that is a like a church or people that worship in the same way that you do, a temple, a synagogue. Sometimes that's a place for spiritual growth and enlightenment and meditation. Anybody have great stories about finding people with similar interests and new friends in those sorts of places?
We have a comment here saying recently I connected with a childhood friend by Facebook. He was on a lengthy vacation. I messaged almost every day as he drove from DC across the country and deep into Mexico. We talked about what he was seeing and experiencing every day.
You got to virtually go on that trip with him. That's pretty fantastic. What about neighbors? And it feels like this has changed. Do you agree that the degree with which we interact with neighbors, not what it's like that I remember as a child, but I will say our newer neighborhood we moved into here in North Carolina because one of our neighbors got cancer while pregnant and the whole neighborhood came around that family. It pulled us all together. And now we're the kind of neighborhood I remember as a kid where we have cookouts and get-togethers. And I'm thrilled to say that the mama and the baby are both doing great. They got through the cancer scare. They took the baby early and she's just fine. So do you all find neighbors to be a source of people that are part of your circle?
Not really. Where I moved, it's a very, everybody's pretty much keeps to themselves. They'll wave, but I'd say in the nicer weather, you see them out more, so you may chat a little bit, but there's only one person that, like, we'll take walks when it's nice enough. We'll go for walks. But the rest of the neighborhood, they'll chat a little bit, but nobody's outside in front of the house like they used to be.
It's
Yeah,
changed.
they pretty much keep to themselves.
I always wonder, and this may be me looking at the world through rose-colored glasses, are people just waiting for an invitation? Like, do they really not want to interact with each other, or they just don't know how to start it? And if somebody would extend the invitation, and maybe they'd love to come over and visit. A woman moved to our area fairly recently from New York, doesn't know anybody, and out of the blue, I had met her through church actually, and she asked if I wanted to come over and have dinner with her. Oh, that was so nice. And that was her making a big effort to start expanding the number of people that she knows, and now that helped me as well. So maybe be the one to extend the invitation and delight the person that receives it.
Along those lines, Michelle, we have a comment saying, I entirely agree. I find our neighbors to be more distant than what I had in my childhood. Also, I reach out, some reach back, and some do not reach back. I have 2 neighbors / families that we are close to.
If they found a couple, that's very good. Some safety tips. We got to talk about this. There are a lot of ways to go out and meet people. I find this is especially true when someone has lost a spouse and they're now trying to go out and meet people, but it's been so long since they've gone by themselves to meet people, they're just not aware of some important safety tips because the world has changed and continues to change. So make sure that it's always in a group setting where you're not caught by yourself with just 1 or 2 people. And it's always best maybe for the first meeting to be a short one, just in case it's not a good fit. And then you could choose to get together for longer periods of time once you've had those initial encounters. So, but public is best. And there are so many places where you can do that, between restaurants and coffee shops and parks and places where there'll be lots of other people around. So just be careful. Certainly we've probably all got a few stories we've heard of people being enticed into a situation that was not safe. I don't want that to stop you from going out and meeting people. Just be cautious and stay in public places, at least until you get to know them. So I have some random tips. Some of the things that lead to isolation when somebody relies on one person, and we kind of talked about this, situations where somebody spends all of their time with their spouse, and then their spouse, even if they don't pass, but maybe they need to be in the hospital for an extended time, and they're just not, they don't have anybody else to lean on, to talk to reach out to support them. So making sure that your social circle is always bigger than just 1 or 2 people. Some people fear, that really, one of my children, extremely introverted. Oh, the thought of inviting new people and going to meet new people, really difficult. But thankfully, she's always had that 1 or 2 really outgoing friends who invite her along. And so that's how she gets places. She's got close relationships who care about her and take her with them, and then she gets comfortable in new places with new people. Kind of related to personality too. Some people don't want a lot of time with others, and then maybe being around others kind of wears them out. And then other people need that energy to kind of thrive. There's an embarrassment factor, especially if you've got some continence problems or other things that you can't control. Thankfully, there's a lot of movement toward keeping people out and about by having special undergarments or other things that allow whatever the issue is to not be a barrier to you being able to still interact with other people. And then functional decline. I've had a family member who just sits around and watches television all the time. There's nothing healthy about that. And so when she had an opportunity to go and do something a little bit more active, and a friend invited her to go out to dinner, she barely made it back home. It wore her out because she had let her functional decline be so severe. Thankfully, she's been working on it since then and turned that around. But sometimes we don't even realize how little we're moving and how that limits us in the things that we want to do. And then some things, if you've not experienced them, especially if you've moved and you're trying to figure out how to meet new people, there are now a number of ways to do that. And I'm not talking online dating, but these are online apps to help you kind of find people that like the purple butterflies that hatch in August kind of thing. So there's one called Meetup, meetup.com. Nextdoor, I believe, is national now, which is sort of an online chat group, and you can limit it by your neighborhood or your zip code. There, a lot of communities have their own Facebook group, and then Eventbrite is another one. Like we're still fairly new to Charlotte, and so we'll say, what kind of festival is going on this weekend? And Eventbrite is a good source to tell us what sorts of things are going on that we might want to go and check out. So talk to me some more. What do you think? Anything resonate with all of this?
I like the meetup groups. I haven't used it recently, but I do like the meetup groups. And when you have other people to go to events with, Eventbrite is great, and community Facebook. So those are great. But a lot of times, like for myself, I plan it and go by myself to these. And when you attend a thing like at Eventbrite, it's not really a social interaction that you can get from that. You can get the activity, so you're not just sitting around doing nothing, but there's very little social if you're going by yourself. At least that's been my experience.
Interesting. So you're saying you're going to like an Italian food festival kind of thing. You get there, you have the food, but you don't really get a chance to meet people.
Right, right. Because most of the people are there with their family, their friends, and they're sitting at their tables, and they're not they're not doing it for that. They're doing it as an outing with their group.
Got you.
But meetup's good.
Yeah, agree. And Meetup, my goodness, you can put in whatever weird sounding thing that you're interested in, and you find other people that share your interest. Anything more in the chat, Jeff?
Not right now.
So kind of to wrap up, the more we can get and stay connected, it's amazing what impact that has on our overall health, our function, our outlook, our ability to get through dark days and not so dark days. We're intended to be very connected people. It's how we're wired. I was talking to a group a little while back, and that when you're having a dark day, you just you feel lonely or you feel sad. One thing you can do is to keep it all inside, and that can be dangerous. That can kind of become a go from bad to worse, sort of one of those slippery slopes very quickly. You can take it if you're a spiritual person, you believe in a higher power, you can take it there and spend some time there. You can reach out to somebody and say, boy, I'm having a dark day. Will you sit with me? Will you talk with me? Will you help me through this? Or you can go do something for somebody else. And it's amazing how that picks us up to go and do something for someone else. So I was having this conversation, and there were some people in the room who had retired but had been CEOs of some really big companies. And one of those, and in this case, we're back to talking about a couple of men, but one of those men said, oh, when I'm having a dark day, I don't want to bring anybody down with me. I'll just keep it to myself. And one of the other men spoke up so quickly. He said, then you robbed me of the opportunity to come alongside you. And that's what I needed. And don't you ever rob me of that opportunity again. And I was like, whew, right, I'm done. That was beautiful. That expressed exactly how important it is and how much we actually want to be of use to each other. So I'm not sure why we're always so hesitant to reach out and ask for that help. Would you all agree?
Definitely, definitely. It's hard to accept help, that's all.
It is. It is. I've been trying to better understand within my practice, trying to better understand why that is, because most people find it's hard to be vulnerable. It's hard to let people know that you're struggling, but yet would you agree on the flip side, if someone close to you were struggling, would you want to know about it so you could help them?
Oh, sure, sure.
Yeah. Well, I thank you all. Yes, go ahead.
I think one has to be willing to help themselves first, if that makes any sense, right?
We do tend to try that first, and then sometimes stay there too long.
Well, I guess maybe the right answer is be willing to accept help.
Yeah.
Right.
Easier said than done.
That's a hard thing to do.
Yeah.
That's a hard thing to do.
I thank you all. I hope you've heard how powerful relationships are and can be, and how important they are to your long-term health. I'm here for you. Look forward to when we gather and do this the next time, Jeff. And thank you so much for inviting me.
Michelle, it's a no-brainer. Always enjoy our presentations with you, and let's certainly do it again. Love to have you. And thanks to all of our attendees who are here today, and especially those who shared their thoughts through the chat and the questions panel, and who had their voices heard. Really appreciate that, and hope you got a lot out of it, as much as I did. So a couple final thoughts here, as if you want to share anything else, please feel free to. Looks like we might have a comment here. Thanks for bringing us all together to think about the importance of relationships. Good thought there, Jacqueline. You're always full of great thoughts. Our webinar series goes forward, as always. Share a couple of interesting ones with you. Next Wednesday, the 27th, we'll be talking about trustee selection, how to choose the right one for you. That's always a good one. We do that on a quarterly basis here. April 3rd, special needs, what families need to know about planning for a loved one with special needs. That's on April 3rd. Both of those are with Steve Elville. This Thursday and Friday, I'll be at the Brain Injury Association of Maryland annual conference exhibiting, and Steve will be presenting on Friday at that. So if you're going to be at that conference, which is a big conference up in Pikesville, stop by and see me. I'd love to see you. And then also on April 4th, I just got notice from our friends at Maryland Able that they'll be hosting a national webinar with the U.S. Social Security Administration. It's called Able Accounts and Rep Payee Reporting, talking all about how Able accounts interact with Social Security disability benefits, income/asset tests, reporting Able information to SSA, and rep payees managing Able accounts. So that, if that's something that you're interested in or need to know about, I'll send you the link, which brings me to the end. That I send out a follow-up message to all the attendees, which includes the slides and the video from today, as well as some information regarding Michelle and Propel, and some other information that we discussed today. So hope that'll be helpful to you as you move forward. So any further comments? Looks like we're all set there, and call that a wrap today. Michelle, thank you very much. Really appreciate having you here, and we'll see you again soon on the Elville webinar series. Have a great day, everybody.
Thank you.